put the commander needs to be where the most dangerous or the most important thing is, where the primary attack is. That's where he needs to be.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And, about every 10th show, I think, is where we're at, Kim. There's some sort of technology, wookie-dookie, hoopty fruts that the gremlins come out, sunspots. I don't know what was going on this morning, huh?
Yeah, but we got, good, reliable throwback to Zoom. So if we're not looking quite as pretty as we normally are, or we're probably looking better actually without the 4K.
Yeah, the fuzziness. Yeah, well, and thanks to my former boss, Les Fuller, for joining us here. And you know what? He's one who has always reminded me of the great special forces way of planning the PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. We didn't have to quite go to emergency, which would have been the phone call. But we were, yes, sir. We dropped on down to the contingency. And you know what? It worked. It worked, didn't it? That's why we have that plan, isn't it, sir?
That's exactly right. Murphy can get in your back pocket and he'll sit there till you tell him to get out.
Yeah, and sometimes he doesn't listen when you tell him to get out. Well, hey, sir. Again, I'm honored. We're honored to have you here. I've always enjoyed working with you, being mentored by you, and just catching up and chatting with you. And I remember years ago doing some work with Charlie Cleveland when he had just taken over the group. And I asked him this question as we're driving from Patch Barracks to Panzer Concern. And I said, hey, boss, is being the group commander really cool? Is that the best job that you've ever had in SF? And he told me something that surprised me, but I don't want to lead you down that road, sir. But so I know it's been a couple of days, but I'm throwing that question at you from what was the best job that you had as a Green Beret?
Otis, thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy watching people that I've worked with do good. And I get more pleasure out of that than I did in my own career, because I think I facilitated the good ones getting along, and I facilitated the ones who I didn't think should sire a litter of puppies. I made sure they didn't get the opportunity to have any puppies like themselves. Every job I had in the Army, I liked. I didn't really want every job I had, but every job I did as good as I could. I enjoyed being a team leader in 3rd Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group in 1977, 1976. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed being the Group XO for 3 years for Jesse Johnson and Bill Tangney. I enjoyed being a battalion commander in 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group, although 5th Group and 10th Group aren't exactly alike. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed being a battalion commander because you are really with the troops. As group commander, they're a long way away. You got to get through the Mike Dietrichs and the Charlie Clevelands. You got to get through them to go find the troops. And I found myself as a 10th Group commander, since I spent most of my time in Bosnia, when I would walk around in the mornings, kind of slip in the back door of the companies, a lot of the NCOs had no idea who I was. I'd walk into a team room, they go, "Hey, how's it going?" I said, "Pretty good. How's it going with you?" He said, "Great." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Doing this." He said, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm a group commander." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact." So you know, probably battalion commander was the best job I had. I enjoyed it. I got to see the captains. I knew the team sergeants. As a group commander, I could keep up with the company commanders, but I couldn't keep up with 72 company command or team leaders. I just couldn't keep up with them. I'd see them, I'd talk to them, but you majors, you were the guys that I had enough brain capacity to remember the majors and to work with them. So, um, yeah, every job was great. Some jobs were greater than others. The hardest job I ever had in the Army was as a captain when I was a recruiting company commander.
Ooh,
That was the hardest job I had in 31 years in the Army.
that's
It
a
was
hell of a sales job. I don't think people understand that, do they?
No, it's a lot of people say, "Oh, thank God I wasn't in recruiting." I said, "Well, maybe you should have been. You treat the soldiers that you got a little bit better because uh, it's a tough job, and you can't order recruiting success. You have to lead people and mentor them and coach them to success. You just can't order it. It just doesn't work. So." Every job was great, and I ran into good people in every job I had. American NCO, he and she are out there, and the officers are out there, and they are. People wonder why we got the best army in the world. You just got to look who's in it.
Mm.
I love that. Thinking about what you were saying about your time as a group commander and being disconnected from the soldiers in that way, I'm curious how you dealt with that, not just on a strategic level, because I'm sure there's some good nuggets there, but also we know we've been doing the show for a while. I know how good the Army is with those kind of bureaucratic systems. Could you talk more about how you dealt with that on the more like personal side as the leader of you like, hey, I was with all these guys, I love what we were doing, and now I'm up and get to help the mission in a whole new way, but at the same time, I'm disconnected to the people I enjoy spending my time with.
What I would have to do is go visit them because they're not at Fort Carson.
Mm.
They're in Bosnia, they're in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Georgia, Switzerland. They're all on J sets. They're on mission training. They're out doing the job, and so I have found myself going to visit them. I remember going with the J set from Third Battalion to the Swiss Mountain School, and I won't mention the team leader, but he retired as a two-star, and so he tried to kill me skiing in Switzerland. He tried to ski me off this 300-foot cliff, and I like, I really don't appreciate that. Uh, And I mean, he thought his career was over. We were kind of at the end of the day, we were sitting around, and two Europeans, I'm not sure where they were, they came and sat around where we were and started smoking marijuana. And I thought the team leader was going to have a heart attack. And I said, well, you're not smoking it, and I'm not smoking it. Maybe we should move. But, that's the way they do it, and don't worry about it. Uh, So I'd have to go visit people, and I spent a lot of time on the road visiting people, riding around and checking and seeing how they're feeling, and then working with them to get them what they need. Uh, Maybe not what they want, but what they need to do their job, so they're proficient, efficient, and confident when they're out there doing their job. And some people say I probably did okay job, and some people say I probably didn't do enough. But that's the way the cookie crumbles 30 years later.
How'd you balance that, sir? Because that's a really difficult thing. Because as a leader, you can spend all your time going down and seeing what everybody needs, but then on the other side, you also got to be balancing that with you're reporting to the boss back at Fort Bragg, or you can put your business hat on. You've got the owner, the board members, all those folks.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
The I don't. I think you just use your gut. The boss goes to where the most critical thing is happening, and that's where he wants to be. And I sort of learned that when I was the XO of a mech battalion in Germany in 1/6 Infantry. I was a Special Forces officer in the 1st Armored Division as the XO of a mech battalion. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I bet you hated that." I said, "I had 900 soldiers, man. I loved it." I said, "I learned a lot." So we're going to do squad live fire day night squad live fire at Grafenbeer. And the battalion commander, a wonderful guy named Jim Gavitt, West Point graduate, great guy. He said, "Look, I want you to move the medical platoon to that range. They're 577s, they're 113s. I want you to move them there with the PA and everybody." I said, "Sir, how are we going to run sick call?" He said, "I don't care about sick call." He said, "I want all my medical help being 3 minutes away from the most dangerous thing the battalion is going to do for the next 5 days."
Hmm.
And that's where I want it. And I thought, you're right. So I chalked that up. Battalion commander, I was in Pakistan with a guy John Fensel, and we were doing some work up in the Swat Valley, and the doctor was in the Swat Valley with Fensel's guys. And he said, "Sir, I understand you're going to do a jump tomorrow in Peshawar." And I said, "Yeah, we are." He said, "Can I come jump?" I said, "Yeah, you can drive down here." I said, "But when it's over, you're going to drive 12 hours right back. You're not going to even be able to get a canteen of water." He said, "Sir, I don't understand." He said, "Because the most dangerous thing we're doing is in the Swat Valley.
Hmm.
And that's where you're going to be. So if you want to come jump, fine, good. But you're going back because there's nothing really dangerous here other than eating the food, or riding with them." So yeah, I learned the commander needs to be where the most dangerous or the most important thing is, where the primary attack is. That's where he needs to be. And so I tried to do that. I don't think I did a very good job of keeping the Fort Bragg people apprised of what I was doing. The SOC Cent commander, for both of them, I'd been their Group XO, Jesse Johnson and Bill Tangney, so they knew me and I knew them. So I spent a lot of time keeping them apprised because we were, working in the CENTCOM. And then as a 10th Group commander, I kept General Lambert apprised of what we were doing because he was telling us what to do. But, General Beauray and General Tagney, I probably should have done a better job of politicking the 10th Group with what we're doing and what our plan is and how we're doing and things that are going on. I did that with my raider, who was the major's senior raider, or the battalion commander's senior raider. I'd worked the battalion commanders with them, but I probably should have worked mission and finances and structure like that.
I'm curious, and actually, this is a different question I had, but talking about kind of the that gap, wanting to do, or not wanting to necessarily, but it's like, oh, maybe I should have done more politicking and those kind of things there. Could you give a little bit of perspective? We've talked about this, Dad, on the show, but not with anyone who has that much experience with it, of this weird thing that happens from the civilian perspective, of course, where I understand, the small army we talk about, Dad, and what special forces are doing, what we're doing in different places. And then it seems like it goes up and up and up, and then all of a sudden it becomes politics at some point. And that gap is really hard to understand for folks outside of the military. I would love, Les, if you could explain that a little bit of what that looks like, or maybe why that's necessary, or any sort of background, kind of that inside information of that jump from soldier to maybe a little bit of politician.
Cannon, good question. No matter what we're doing, we're always dealing in a resource constrained environment. We never have enough money, enough people, enough this or that. And we're always not fighting, but USASOC arm wrestles the SEALs and they arm wrestle the Marines, they arm wrestle the Air Force for money for either helicopters or weapons or night vision goggles or training for the NCOs and special forces. And sometimes the airplane is a little more sexy than having the NCOs or the warrant officers have another capability that they can use in the low level source kind of deal that really makes more of a difference long term than a nice new airplane or something. So I mean, you're always, and I think the SF guys, the special forces guys, we have a harder time selling that because you can't see it.
Mm.
When I was the SOC commander in Stuttgart, I took Sack Ure to Kosovo. Well, he was in Kosovo, and I told him, I said, "Sir, I'm going to be in Kosovo tomorrow. I understand you're in Kosovo tomorrow. Can you give me 3 hours in the afternoon?" He goes, "What are you going to do?" I said, "We're going to fly by helicopter to the Russian LCE, and I want you to go meet the Russian team." So I flew General Ralston up there, and he got briefed about 2 hours by the team, warrant, team sergeant, team leader. And then I flew him back to the airfield, and he got on his Learjet and flew back to Mons. About 2 days later, I'm back in Stuttgart, and he calls me. I said, "Hey, sir, how you doing?" He goes, "Good. Hey, Les, I'm reading the intel report from your Russian LCE." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I can hear them talking to me. I can hear their voices, and this means so much more to me because I've met the people who give it to me. And I want to thank you for doing that because you've helped me understand what it is I'm trying to learn." And I said, "Sir, you're welcome. If you want to do some more of that, I'll take it to some more of these guys." He said, "Yeah, I'd like to do that, but let's don't go by helicopter. I don't like helicopters. I like fast jets." And so, that's kind of the thing that you think you need to do and you hope to do, and you take your boss out there and you let them see what the troops are up to. General Bowray came to Bosnia several times, so he would understand what's happening and what the stresses on the teams are trying to be JCOs, or what the teams are doing in Latvia, Lithuania, Georgia, and why they're out there, and and experiencing that. In February of '98, we took 2 teams to Latvia, 2 to Estonia, and 2 to Latvia. And you know what we found out? Satellite radio doesn't work up there because the satellite is really below the horizon. And what we found out for 6 weeks, that the only communications those teams had to the ODB was manual Morse code.
Wow. Talk about old school.
Man, oh man, you talking about guys starting sweating bullets and breaking out the leg key and breaking out the tapes and practicing, because I mean you had to send the morning report, the op rep, you had to send everything by that 18 Echo. And so you never know that till you go there and you find out that doesn't work. Now what are we going to do? We were all the way to E on pace, Otis.
Yeah, because that was just, we ticked that box.
Yeah,
because we had to tick that box. We weren't expected to get.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. That's my kind of silly civilian question. I'd almost pictured Morse code like, Otis, you're the nerd who actually paid attention to that. Come on, we don't really need this stuff. And then you get out there, oh gosh.
And I would tell the people at the Special Warfare Center, I said, you're going away with Morse code. I said, in Pakistan, I was riding down the road in a Land Cruiser, and the guy in the back threw out about 25 foot of wire off kind of like a 74 Bravo radio and used his leg key to bring in the outstations where they could go to voice. and without understanding Morse code, you don't know what they're saying. They might be bringing in the guys to ambush you. So I mean, so if you can't understand what your bud's telling his buddy, sometimes you might be in trouble.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kim, because mine
So
probably revolves around another war story. So
hey, we'll get some war stories. I'll let y'all go. But no, the thing I was thinking is, talking about the want, giving them what they need versus what they want, and then talking about all of these different places that you were going and seeing what they really need there. The interesting thing to me as a leader, and this is where it gets into that politic, and like you're saying, is there's this really interesting thing when you're trying to solve problems on that big of a scale, where it's like Otis over there in Kosovo, he needs all of these things. And that is the most important thing for Kosovo right there for this operation. And then you go to Estonia and it's like, hey, Jeff up here, he needs these things. And it's just the most important thing for that. And then you zoom out and those most important things for those folks, not that they lose the importance, but as you start to zoom out, you see the most important thing for all of these different places. Yeah. And it makes that decision criteria that much harder. Could you talk a little bit about your perspective of kind of, I don't even know if you could try to balance something like that, but, just those thoughts on trying to make those right decisions with all that weight and responsibility?
I think you take it one at a time, but you've got battalion commanders and company commanders that are down there. I'm thinking of a time we were in Kosovo, and I think Otis, you were the B team commander, and what was that base in Kosovo? What was it called?
I could have told you if you wouldn't ask me, sir.
Bond Steel or something like that.
Bond Steel, yeah. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Bond Steel, ain't it?
Yeah. And I sent you a platoon of SEALs and the Ranger Regimental Reconnaissance Platoon. And I don't know how you balance all those guys, but you did a fine job, did a great job. You were a major, you had an SF company, you had a Ranger reconnaissance platoon, and you had a SEAL of SEALs. And they all had the same mission, but they all had different equipment. I remember you laid it all out one day, and we looked at it and said, "Are we really all in SOCOM? This is unbelievable." So I think you take the important stuff. The equipment stuff kind of worked itself out. What I tried to do was to get into the education and training piece to work with their brains rather than their biceps, to give them the 60-mile view of why I'm doing what I'm doing, so they know what I'm doing and how I'm going to get them to where they want to be, even though they think their route might be better. I'm going to give them my experience of having been down that road before. You can go down this road if you want to, but you're not going to like it because here's where it's going to fail. And I remember telling the battalion S4 that one day of the 10 things he had to watch in a winter warfare exercise. And he said, "Sir, you're kidding me." And I said, "No, these things, if you don't watch them, Murphy will have a field day." And he said, "How did you learn all this?" I said, "Because it happened to me. Every one of them happened to me over the last 20 years. And, it's not happening anymore. But you experience is a big thing. You get the experience, then you learn the life lesson. But the NCOs weather that very well. They will do. You don't tell a subordinate you tell them what to do. You don't tell them how to do it. You let them use their initiative. And I've got some great stories of sending NCOs out by themselves for 6 months, and I never saw them. Well, I guess he's doing okay, and they did what they were supposed to do. And if we have time, I can tell that story. It's a Pakistani story, but sending the NCOs and warrants out to being JCOs in Bosnia, that was a seismic shift from what 10th Group had been doing, and we had to learn a lot of lessons, and some of them were about even when the boss is not looking, you got to do what's right because they're going to find out. He's going to find out anyway, whether you think he will or not. You just never know.
That's that trust factor, and we had a bit of an advantage in the Special Forces Regiment because we all went through similar filters to get there. So that enabled us to have a closer or maybe it's a tighter trust factor. But there's still the little guy in the back of your head that goes, what the hell is Otis doing? How'd you deal with that in that sense? I mean, did you tend to lean towards the just trust him, and then if it gets bad, then we'll just pick it back up from there, or how'd you do that, sir? Just share with
It's my nature to trust everybody till they show me that I can't trust them. And as a group commander, we were sending 2 teams to Macedonia. I don't remember when it was, and I went and talked to the 2 teams, 2 team sergeants, 2 team leaders, the 2 teams. I happened to be in town before they deployed, and I really didn't know the captain, but I knew the team sergeants. I went, okay, yeah, that'd be fine. And about a week later, 2 weeks later, Doris, the group secretary, says, "Hey, sir, you've got a phone call from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs." I went, "Yeah, right. The chairman is calling the."
Doris doesn't joke, though.
And so I picked up the phone, and it's like, Colonel Fuller? And I said, yes. It said, "This is Colonel so-and-so from General Shelton's office." And I went, "Authenticate Alpha Bravo." I said, "Yeah, what? I mean, why are you calling me?" He said, "Well, the chairman is going to be in Europe, and he sees that you've got 2 ODAs in Macedonia." And I said, "That's true." He said, "Well, he's going to go visit them the day after tomorrow." Now, and I'm thinking mentally, is there any way I can get to Macedonia
That's right.
in 2 days? And the answer was, no, you can't do it. You can't get there before he gets there. And you just got to, I knew the team sergeants. I said, well, it's going to be what it's going to be. And there we go. And talking to General Shelton's office, it was a great visit. And the captain said it was a wonderful visit. And the chairman talks to these 2 teams for 2 hours.
Dang.
And the captains, when they reported back, they really weren't very happy after I gave them a tongue lashing. I said, "What did you talk about?" "Oh, nothing really." I said, "You can't talk to the chairman for 2 hours and not say anything." I said, "What did you say to him? Because I need to tell General Bowray and General Tangney so they know before General Shelton called General Schoonmaker, because those are 2 good buddies, about what the captains ratted out SOCOM about. I need to get this out of Fort
Gotta
Carson.
start playing some defense. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I need to get a little offense here. So, trust your people. They will amaze you. It is amazing what an Army soldier can do if you'll let him or her and give them education and training to get it accomplished. They will self-actualize in what they really want to do.
What do you think about
Jim.
so I'm curious, you kind of hinted at this earlier, talking about limiting the impact, and you intentionally didn't use the word bad. I'm going to oversimplify, just use the word bad, but limiting the impact of that bad team member, of that person who's not the pusher, not helping things really move along. But you do still need folks like that in your team. They fill a role. There's a spot on the bus for them still. What's your thoughts on how to limit that impact so it doesn't poison the rest of the team? Keep them in their corner where they're real happy and still helping without the attitude getting out.
That's a good question. How do you limit the impact of of a malcontent. As a battalion commander, they tended to explode at the most inopportune time. Normally in front of General Davis, the CG of SF Command. And as a battalion commander, I was probably most I was the hardest. I I took out a lot of people that I didn't think were performers, and they were majors and captains and team sergeants and team leaders, and I said, the soldiers of this company should not have to put up with you not one more second. And matter of fact, I'm not even sure why you're here. You should have been fired before I ever got here. And so I was very hard as a battalion commander. If you needed to be cut, you got cut, and there was no way you were going to reach maturity and get into a pasture of a bunch of heifers that are in heat, because you're not getting close to them.
So, first off, damn it, Camden, that was my question, but I'm going to spin it. Shouldn't have let the boy go. That was my own fault, But if I'm going to spin it, how did you handle those conversations? Because it's easy to tell somebody else to go fire Sergeant Smith.
Yeah.
But you don't get to do that.
No. What I did, I called the guy in and say, "You're fired." And then I found the group commander. He was in Kenya, and I told him what I'd done. He said, "I'll support you." And I'm like, "Thank you, sir," because it's either me or him, because both of us can't be here. And then the captain, they didn't perform well on a operation we did with the guys from Fort Bragg in October of '92, and so I removed him and his team sergeant. When it has to get done, you may not like it, but you got to do it, Otis. You just, I can't let this go one more day.
Yeah.
And it's coming. Otis, when you were a commander, after about 15 or 20 minutes, you read those people and you know exactly what you got, and you sort of make up your, like, I don't think this guy's going to work out. And this guy I'd fired, relieved, I wrote him 5 counseling statements in the 5 preceding months of things that he wasn't doing correctly. And I was trying to help him, but I knew he wasn't going to do it. He was too smart to take my help. So he ended up, I don't know whatever happened to him. I never saw him again. But they just beg for it. They just won't accept your help because they're a lot smarter than cow farmer from Georgia.
Well,
that.
Yeah.
I know we got the same question, so you
ain't getting it this time. You ain't getting it this time. But it's now. Damn it, and I forgot. Oh man. Yep, there goes that paper lock. You go then, boy. It's
gonna be real funny if this is your question. But no, the what comes to mind with that is somebody like that who you try to give the guidance, they think they're too smart for it, all those kind of things there. It brings back to mind for me this whole thing of, it's like, you can tell me the stove is hot, but I gotta touch it 2 or 3 times before I remember that the stove is actually hot. Yeah. What are your thoughts as a leader on how to kind of work around that? Because we want to help them, but at the same time, it's almost like you have to let them fail in a controlled environment in order to learn the actual lesson. What are your thoughts there?
Well, when I was a battalion commander, I would take team briefbacks, and the captains, I would ask them a lot of nitnoid questions. And if the warrant officer was briefing, I'd kind of let him talk. I wouldn't ask many questions. Finally, one question, I said, did you dream this up? I mean, this is your concept of the operation? He said, yes, sir. I was okay, let's do it. And the captains eventually would come back and said, sir, my warrant officer will brief. I said, no, he won't. You're going to brief. And they finally came up to me and said, sir, we don't understand. You're killing us on the briefbacks, but the warrant officers, you just kind of let go. Why is that? I said, well, as a captain, you were a lieutenant, and you've probably done something that nobody ever changed. And so you kind of know what your thinking generates. I said, but the warrant officer, he was a private, he was a sergeant, and he may not have ever dreamed up anything on his own that somebody didn't change. So he doesn't know if his combat thinking works or not. I said, so I listen to the brief back, and if I think it's in this box and it's going to be safe, but it could be better, but let's let it ride, and we can improve it on the after action report. I said, so I let the warrant officer run it, and then he will know that his thinking actually does work, and it'll work in combat. So now he has some confidence in his thinking, and so I tried to do that, as opposed to asking 1,000 questions. Hey, we can get the 1,000 questions when the live fire is over and we see how it went. But I tried to get people to have confidence in what they were thinking, that it will work and they can lead people in combat.
What was now I'm going to shift back. So, one of the things that I've seen in business, and I'd love your thoughts on from the business side, based on the years and experience in the Army. Why do people hold on to bad performers? Why are they afraid? Whereas when we were in the regiment, we would, most of us would identify that guy and say, all right, send him down to the motor pool. He just shouldn't be on a team, sort of thing. Yeah. Why does that why is that people so reluctant outside of the military to do that?
I think it's because, of course, you've got a salary invested in these guys and benefits, and you had some time and money spent on recruiting them. And sometimes you just don't want to admit that you made a mistake. Mm. I know at one of the companies I was in, they I hadn't been with the company very long. They said, you need to go to Fort Bragg. We've got a hostile customer. And I went to SWCC and talked to the customer. And I went to the place that we were doing the work for SWCC. And I listened to the people and I listened to them. So that night, I called the president of the company and he said, what do you think? I said, sir, he needs to be fired. He is a square peg in a round hole. And no matter what you do to him, he will not change. He is the exact, if you could find somebody most likely not to be able to do this job, he's it. He said, is that it? I said, no, sir, that's not it. I said, there's one more thing. He said, what's that? I said, not only should this guy be fired, but the man who hired this guy, you need to fire him too. Because Helen Keller could see this guy wasn't going to work out. And the president was somewhat taken back because I think he's the guy that hired him. So you hire people and you hope they work out. And in some companies, I've met some guys, that hired and they were getting big money. They're making more money than I was making as a CEO. And like, who hired this guy? Oh, my Lord. So eventually you work with him, and find out, he's not going to work out. So you got to let him go. And then you find out you actually could do better without him than you could with him. So I don't know what people are. They don't hurt anybody's feelings, and business is business. But good leaders don't subject their employees or soldiers to bad leadership, uh, because it doesn't do them any good. They've got a brick on their head. They can't self-actualize and go be high performers because they've got a nitwit holding them back.
And I like to add a layer to that, Dad, because as you're asking that question, what comes to mind for me in my rugby coaching environment is it's almost this like ego of yourself as the coach and as the person developing the talent that you look at him and you're like, oh, but if he's so close, and it's if he just pulled his head out of his ass, like if he just paid a little bit more attention, it's like, oh my gosh, we were so close. And I think it's a little bit of ego of you want to develop the person, you want to commit to the development of those kind of things, but they're just, to use the rugby term, they're just not coachable at the end of the day. Les, I'm curious, what are some signs, maybe some early indicators? You talking about Helen Keller wouldn't have hired that guy. What are some things that you would see that are that early sign that it's like, oh, this isn't going to work out. They're not coachable. However you would put it.
I think you, as you go through the process of watching them do their job, I would ask questions that were maybe 2 or 3 levels below them, to see if they knew, or would ask why I asked that question. Sir, why did you ask that question? I said, well, because on my experience, if that little point right there is right, then the rest of it will 99% of the time, the rest of it's okay too. But if that little point way back here is wrong, you can't make it right when you get to the finish line. It won't be there. And so you watch those little things, and you watch them when they don't think you're watching, and you see how they do, and see what they're up to. I mean, all the guys in the regiment are type A. They want to be heard. You let them talk, but you don't have to do everything that they suggest. So you kind of weed through it, but you let them all have their say, because they all got something to say. I was in Pakistan again as battalion commander, and the brigadier asked me, said, we would like to invite your battalion to send a mountain climbing expedition in September to climb the 8th highest mountain in the world. He said, well, what do you think, Colonel Fuller? And I said, sir, give me 2 hours and I'll give you an answer. So I went down and found a Matt Sergeant by the name of Walt Guerin. And Walt was a 10th group guy from Batholz, who is now in 5th group. And Walt was a graduate of the German Bergführer course, the mountain school. And I basically asked Master Sergeant Guerin, I said, here's what we've been offered. What do you think? Can we do it? Do we have you and 3 other NCOs who can get ready? And this was February, get ready by September. And he goes, yes, sir. I said, okay. So I went and told the brigadier, sir, we can do it. We'd be happy to do it. And somebody says, well, that's all you did? I said, yeah, that's all I did. I asked the Master Sergeant, can you do it? And he goes, yes, sir. I said, okay, go do it. And that was about the 2 things I told him: bring everybody back alive, and I need a receipt for every penny you spend. Other than that, you're on your own, because I have no idea what you're doing. But I trust you because I've been with you in some bad situations, and so I know who you are and what you're about. And so I left him alone. If I'm going to ask him 50 questions, I'm wasting his time. He could tell me the truth or lie to me. I wouldn't know anyway. So why bother him? If you trust him, let him go. And I trusted Walt Guerin with my life. I had many times before, and I'll continue to trust him. Now that's a Special Forces NCO. The commander asked him, hey, Up or down? He goes up. Okay, got it. So I went to, and we got $50,000 from the CENTCOM commander for this mission. And the first year we did not climb all the way to the top because of the weather, but the second year we got invited back. Second year we did summit. And those four SFNCOs saved about a half dozen lives that year of people that had altitude sickness and some other problems. So the SF guys won the day on these mountains in Pakistan.
Wow. Talking about planning and Dad, you introduced him as the king or something along those lines of pace planning, right? I want to ask you less about something that I have a problem with. We've talked about this in our leadership development courses with different cohorts before. The the I don't even know, feeling, habit, whatever, of jumping to the E in pace. Of something goes wrong, and it's like, well, I know I have this emergency plan here, so I'm just going to go right to that and, really just accelerate the process too much. And there might have been a better solution along the line, but you jump right to the emergency solution. Could you talk a little bit about maybe your experience with that, or why you think folks do that, or maybe how to not do that so much?
Yeah, I tend not. I never wanted to get to the E because when you get there, you ain't got anything else. Yes, it's like when you're out in the cold and you look in your rucksack and you still got another sweater.
You're still
very
good.
seldom ever put that last sweater on. As cold as it was, as cold as I was, I never put the last sweater on because that's it. It's not getting any warmer. And so I'm just going to leave that. I don't know when I'd ever pick it up, but I never wanted to go to the E because that's it. You're done. Uh, and there's no other E after E. Uh, so I never want to go to the E. I want to work it hard on the front end to make those systems work so you never get to the uh, last gas place that you got to go. Uh, and I want, I try to make the systems work. They're there for a reason. Everybody knows the system, so let's make it work.
I think the in that line too is, by the way, I love that analogy of I ain't that last sweater. I'm never putting it on because there's nothing left. And I think that's part of it is you have to. E has to be bad enough. I mean, it's not it is truly not an alternative you want to do. Like, okay, this aircraft doesn't work, that aircraft doesn't work, this car doesn't work, the bus doesn't work. Okay, we're walking. You don't want to do that, right? I mean, I think that's where the E really comes in.
Yeah, it's like, the book The Longest Walk, where the Polish cavalry guys walked from Siberia all the way down to India. They didn't have any choice. That's what they did. But I'm just not too sure as a team leader. I wanted to walk from Aspen back to Colorado Springs, and you can't use a road. I'm just not sure I wanted to do that.
No, no, definitely. Sir, what's a life lesson, leadership lessons more specifically, that you picked up as a young lieutenant that's been like a thread that's guided you entire career?
Underwrite mistakes, honest mistakes. Let your subordinates make mistakes. Lord knows I made them all the way through my whole career. And my bosses underwrote my errors. I didn't make any moral decisions that were bad, but I learned to underwrite mistakes and try to keep the pressure off the team. That I would take the pressure, and I really learned that in recruiting command, that the pressure would come down Well, the NCOs are the guys that have got to write the contract. I can't write it as a captain, but I would absorb all the problems from higher headquarters, the brigade and battalion, and I would absorb those and not pass it on because the NCO's got enough things to do without worrying about um, the other stuff. So I would try to take all the pressure from on high and keep that to myself and not pass it down because the soldiers have got enough to do without me dumping some of my rucksack into theirs. Their rucksack's heavy enough.
Uh,
So I learned that, and I learned from a platoon sergeant at Fort Carson as mortar platoon leader. We were the best mortar platoon in the 4th Infantry Division in 1975. But I learned from Sergeant Osinas that NCOs have jobs to do, and officers have got jobs to do too. And if I did my job, then they could do their jobs easier. So he taught me how to do my job. And, General Thurman, said it best when in charge, take charge. There's only one commander, and you're it. And you got to make decisions and you get input, but they all looking to you to make that decision. That whole team wants to make it, but they know it's not their job to make it. You're going to have to make it. And so you get their input, their buy-in, and you make that decision, and then you go do it.
that's great.
And learn from it and bring them with you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, and that reminds me something you said earlier, and I never would have thought this, and actually in my day, I never would have wished the position on anybody, but was recruiter, and how much you got out of that, and that not just the sales aspect of it, but the additional respect of the soldier. I thought that was because you really understand what it takes to get them in and where they come from. So that was a great perspective that I learned that I'd never even thought of in all my years of in the Army of what you could get out of that.
The interesting part, I didn't want to go to recruiting command. I was in the advanced course. I'd come back from Panama. I'd commanded a rifle company. I'd commanded an ODA in those 3 years. And infantry branch said, "Hey, you going to recruiting?" I went, "I'm going to resign. I am not going to recruiting command. There is no way." And he finally convinced me that's where I'd go. And what I found out, my closest recruiter was 32 miles away from my office. Well, I treated these NCOs like it was an ODA. I a lot of captains can't command troops unless they can put their fingers on them or see them. And I'd see these NCOs once a week. I would travel to see them once a week. It'd take me at least 2 days to see everybody. But I treated them like they were an ODA. I told them what I wanted them to do. They knew what the mission was, and then I would follow up when I saw them. And I knew that I had to do that. I couldn't, I had to do what I was supposed to do for them, but also gave them measurable things to do. And they knew when I got there that I would look at it and check what they had done. And time is the most valuable thing we have, because if you waste an hour, you're never getting it back. You might get $100 back, but you're never getting that hour back. Because it's gone. And as I look at my age, I've got more runway behind me than I've got in front of me. And you don't know when you're going to nosedive in, and that's it. You look back at the things you did and the things you wish you'd have done better. But I look at the people I trained or try not to hinder in their progression for greater responsibility. And I take a lot of pride in people that either weathered my poor leadership or prospered under it. I'm not sure which.
Yes, sir. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, I think for me it was something Les he said at the end talking about the weight of responsibility. I think that's something, as a as younger leader in my leadership journey, I always think about, the weight of responsibility can, suck, keep you up at night, those kind of things. But the way you put it of the, not holding on to that weight so you don't go put it to someone else. And I think the example of, the soldiers have enough in the rucksack, I think is the way you put it. I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. Not just like, oh, I got all this weight, everyone's relying on me, but it's like, you need to go do your job. Your job's freaking hard, and I'm doing this to help you do your job. I don't want to make your job harder. And I think that's a nice little reframe of that weight of responsibility that I think is really nice. So thank you for that.
Sir, how about you? What'd you learn?
Well, I learned that it's not easy getting the electrons to do what you want them to do, and much like in life. Just because you want something to happen, it may not happen. And the one story I didn't tell, and if I got 30 seconds, I'll tell it.
Please.
I took my battalion to the National Training Center, and we put 8 teams in the box, and the Op 4 never knew we were there. And we were masterful. And we beat the Op 4 to death. And when it was over, we rented an L-1011 airplane to fly from Palm Springs, California to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And I get on the airplane and the stewardess goes, or the flight attendant, excuse me, Colonel, we have steaks, action movies, and fully stocked liquor carts. I said, there will be no alcohol served on this airplane. She said, you're in the Army, right? I go, yes, ma'am. I said, and we're not serving alcohol. Not one drop to anybody, please. She said, I don't understand. I said, we've been gone for 43 days and nights. We've trained a lot. We've done good. We're a fork. It's been such a great exercise. I said, people on this airplane, some of them will drink too much, and they will get in a car and they will have an accident. They'll get a DUI. They will hang around the battalion area for longer than I want them to because I can't go home till they go home. I said, and they're going to get home and the wife's going to say, here are the kids, and he's about half whipped or not whipped at all. And then you're going to have maybe a domestic dispute. And I said, if we don't serve any alcohol, they will leave quickly and they can drink champagne with their wife when they get home. And the lady looked at me, she said, wow. I said, ma'am, some of these guys, in spite of themselves, it's my job to protect them, whether they want to be protected or not. And for some of these cats, I want their wife to get to the retirement age so she can enjoy what she's put up with. So part of my job is to be the nasty guy that says, not now, we can do it later. I said, and so, they don't like it. And some will understand and some won't understand, but it's my job to protect them. And so I'm just not going to let them do it. It's only 3 hours. I mean, surely we can wait 3 hours to get a Miller Lite or something. So that's what I learned is, leaders sometimes have to do something that is really unpopular, but you're protecting the soldier and his family from something that might happen badly, and you can avoid it. So just avoid it. And so avoid letting people make mistakes if you could help them. But sometimes you watch them and go, I told you it wasn't going to work, but there you go.
Yep. Sir, it has been a pleasure and honor to have you join us today. How do folks get in touch with you? Fellows from the regiment that might have lost contact with you that want to just hit you up and check in?
Oh, I'd say the best way is to send me an email. It's SOF, SOF Strat, STRAT, SOFstrat at earthlink.net. And you'll find me. Now I'd be glad to hear the guys from the regiment. It's a great group of men and women. We I was just thinking this morning while I was walking the dog. 29 years ago, I was the 10th Group commander. I mean, pretty soon I will have. People can be 30 years in the Army and they wouldn't have been in until after I got out of the regiment. And so I learned as the 10th Group commander, once I left the 10th Group, I could only come back as a visitor. I could never come back as a member. And that was a sad day to walk out in June of 1998, heading to the Pentagon. That really was a tearjerker.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, even now, I'll head down to the Emerald Palace, and I'm definitely the outsider, the interloper, the who's this old guy walking around in the mess hall or whatever. So
They go, who? What? You were when? Oh yeah. But one thing I learned getting out of the Army is I would tell all the members of the regiment, if it's not in your medical records, when you get out of the Army, the VA will consider that it never, ever happened. And if you don't get all those things in your medical record, you're leaving money on the table for yourself and your family. Because I've been out 20 years, I feel worse today than the day I got out. And I use heating pads. I use ice packs. I just can't get rid of the aches and pains. And it's all from what we did. And it will come back and get you. And if the VA can't find it in your medical records, then you're not going to get the disability, and it will grow over time. It's not much money, but it is money you're well deserved and you earned. So get it in your records. Don't get in that big a hurry.
yes, sir. Great advice, sir. Like I was saying earlier, always enjoy hanging out with you, and we really appreciate your time, our most precious asset, and all your thoughts and insights.
All right, Otis, thank you for being a great warrior in the 10th Group. I can see as a young captain and as major, and I can take pride in thinking back that you've done a great job, and you continue to do a wonderful job. You and Camden do a good job of training people, educating them, and giving them some insights as to how to make life better, how to do things better. And so I appreciate you doing that for the men and the women of the regiments.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Les Fuller, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes is available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.